What's going on, my fellow degenerates? Passion here once again with another video, this time with some Marvel Rivals gameplay, because it's going to be relevant to the topic of discussion today. So, obviously, if you've spent any amount of time in the Overwatch community in the past, few months, you'll know that Marvel Rivals has been getting hyped up by a lot of these content creators, and a lot of these gaming journalism outlets, saying it's going to be the Overwatch killer, and that Marvel Rivals is going to come out and be what Overwatch 2 should have been, and it's going to blow Overwatch out of the water. And as a lifer with Overwatch, and someone who loves Overwatch for more than its gameplay specifically, I was a bit skeptical about, Marvel Rivals coming out and dethroning Overwatch in my eyes. But the game just came out a few days ago. I've had some time with the game. I played it a bit, and I wanted to give my perspective on the game as someone who, is a major Overwatch fan, and tell you guys whether or not, this game is living up to the hype that people are trying to give it. Now, I will say right off the bat, before we get into this, and before I give my pros and cons about Marvel Rivals, that personally, this is not going to usurp Overwatch for me. I think that the lore and the characters of Overwatch just can't be replicated. And we'll get into what specifically I think about the game in a minute. I just wanted to let you guys know this is not going to be a Marvel Rivals channel. This is probably the only time I'm ever going to cover Marvel Rivals. So I just wanted to put the ease at rest that I'm not one of these people that is going to be like, fuck Overwatch, I'm jumping over to Marvel Rivals. I'm not one of those people. So let's start by patting Marvel Rivals on the back first. Let's go over some of the pros that I've found while playing Marvel Rivals. First off, I really like the animation. I think the animation is top-notch. I think that perhaps the animation is even better than that of Overwatch. Not just because it's more fluid, but also there's just more of it. Like, they animate things that don't necessarily need to be animated. Like for example, when you're in the shop, right, and you're looking at a shop skin, and you actually load up the shop skin. They have a unique animation for the shop, loading in the shop to look at the shop skin. And it's like, why did you need to animate that? But it looks cool. It looks awesome when you see all these cool animations they did for the game. I think the animation and the art direction in the game is fantastic. It's on par or maybe even better than Blizzard's. Secondly, I think the training range in Marvel Rivals is way above what's in Overwatch. Now, I know that in Overwatch 2, they beefed up the training range a little bit, like the practice range. They beefed it up a tiny bit in Overwatch 2, added a couple more sections, a couple more bots, but I feel like Marvel Rivals training range is just way more packed with stuff to mess around with, and I feel like it's a way better area to learn the heroes than Overwatch 2's is. I wish Overwatch 2 would take some cues from Marvel Rivals in that aspect and give us more options in the training range, and more sections of the training range to practice different things. So that's number 2. Number 3 would be, obviously, the larger hero roster at launch. Granted, if you're comparing Marvel Rivals with Overwatch 2, it's about level, right? Maybe Overwatch 2 had a little bit more, But if you're comparing original Overwatch with Marvel Rivals, like, Marvel Rivals has a whole additional, what, like, 12 other heroes that launch Overwatch did not have. So the roster is just huge. I do feel like there's kind of, this is the same problem that Overwatch had too, but like, I feel like the supports are a little bit lacking. There's not as many supports as there are tanks and DPS. But overall, the larger hero roster is great. A lot more choices right off the bat. A lot more unique kind of ideas and heroes that you can have in that larger roster. So, number 4, I do feel like destructible maps are really cool. That was something when I first booted up Marvel Rivals I didn't actually like know was a thing, but when I booted it up again to kind of like get some of the footage for this video and was playing through it more, I played through some of the tutorials and realized, oh wow, you have destructible maps? Like, that's kind of cool. I remember back in Battlefield 3, how cool I thought it was that they had like the destructible map, like that skyscraper map that would, as the match went on, the skyscraper would just kind of tumble, and you know, anyone who was in it would basically get killed. And and I thought that was really cool how they had like a destructible kind of live map like that. And it's a similar thing in Rivals. Like, I remember there was one map I was playing. I'm not 100% sure if I got the footage for it in this video or not. But there's a part when we're on the control point for the objective in Marvel Rivals, and this entire sight line that the enemy has on us just collapses, and then they have to go around it. I'm like, that's so cool. Like, it's so cool that you know, the map is kind of part of the enemy that you're fighting. I think that's great. So I will also say this for number 5, that some of the hero abilities in Marvel Rivals are very creative, very unique. It makes me wish there were more heroes, or that there were heroes in Overwatch that had some of these abilities. Like to point out a couple great examples, Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange's ability to open up portals and jump through them or shoot through them at enemies, and just basically like go from one place to another instantaneously. But I know that Symmetra has her teleporter, but that's a very static, like, you put it, it's a link from point A to point B, and it's not as fluid as Doctor Strange's, where you can literally put that anywhere. I saw a clip on TikTok where an enemy Doctor Strange player puts his portal up right basically on the objective while he's coming back from spawn, and it just eats the entire enemy team and they go falling off the map. Like that's fantastic, and I wish we had something like Doctor Strange. Also, Jeff the Shark, his ability to like swim around and then like eat both allies and enemies and then spit them out. Like, I wish we had a hero like that in Overwatch. Like, come on, that's fantastic. So yeah, so some of their abilities, super creative, super great. I love them. And my final pro for Marvel Rivals is that I like that when you finish a match, obviously you still see the MVP, right? It shows you which player was the MVP of the match. But instead of doing a kind of play of the game for that MVP, what they instead do is they just show you the MVP, and then at the end you can view each individual player's highlight from the match. So it doesn't like just single out that one player. I mean, it still shows who was the MVP, obviously, even in that section. So if you wanted to go watch that player's special highlight that kind of got them the MVP, you can still do that. But it also allows players to go check out what the other players were doing on their team, and see the contributions that their other players made that were impactful to the match. So I would love for a system like that to come to Overwatch. I mean, I know that the play of the game as we have it now is kind of iconic, and I wouldn't want them to necessarily get rid of it, but I would like an option, you know, to see on the end screen of a match, get to see everybody's highlight, each individual player's highlight for each match. I think that would be great. But that's all the pros that I have. Let's talk about the cons, because like I said before, this game, to me, is not going to be the Overwatch killer. I don't think that it is as great as people are hyping it up to be. And it's certainly not going to be enough to at least pull me away from Overwatch. If you are a player who is only interested in Overwatch for the gameplay, and you don't care about the heroes, you don't care about the lore, you don't care about the art direction, you don't care about any of that, you just like the core hero shooter gameplay, then maybe I can see you being turned off to Overwatch and kind of like the distracted boyfriend meme, taking a glance over at Marvel Rivals and maybe going over to that. Because it still has that same gameplay with a lot of like unique, fun twists to it, but if you are a fan of Overwatch for the universe of Overwatch and not just what the gameplay is, then, at least for me specifically, like, I don't think it's enough to kill Overwatch. And if people are leaving Overwatch for this game, then it sucks that, you know, they're going to be not really supporting Overwatch anymore, but at least the people who stay are the people who love Overwatch for being Overwatch and not for arbitrary things like the competitive ladder or the gameplay, stuff like that. So, getting into the cons. For me, the first con is I think the tutorials don't explain enough. So while they are a little bit more in-depth than Overwatch's tutorials, which I thought was great at first, I did notice that through the tutorials, they don't explain certain things, like, for example, the domination tutorial, which is essentially their control map thing. It doesn't explain what overtime is. It like puts you, there's a section in the tutorial where it puts you into overtime, but it doesn't explain it. It doesn't explain what it is. It just, overtime runs out, and that's that, and you don't understand what that is, and you don't understand how to stop that, or how to stall in overtime or anything like that. And also, Hybrid doesn't explain checkpoints either. You can see, like, literally on the map, you can see the checkpoints, but the tutorial ends right after you get to the first checkpoint. And it just says, oh, congratulations, you won. Okay, well, you know, what about the rest of the checkpoints? Because people, I think that's going to mislead players to thinking that all they have to do is get that one checkpoint and then they win, and then they get into a match where they have Hybrid, and they realize, oh, wait, what's going on? I thought we won, you know? Like, so I think it's a bit, it doesn't explain quite enough for me. I will give it props, though, that it does explain a little bit more than Overwatch's tutorials do. Second con, and this is something that's been pointed out by literally everyone who's played the game, even people who love it, is many heroes do kind of have carbon copy abilities from heroes in Overwatch. Like, Black Widow is literally Widowmaker. And there's several others. I can't, like, remember them all. Like, for example, Luna Snow, her ultimate is very reminiscent of Lucio's just basic shift. So it's you know, there's a whole lot of things, and people are talking about how, like, Psylocke is a combination of Genji and Sombra, like, so a lot of abilities are kind of just copy-pasted from Overwatch, so that kind of cheapens it a bit. Con number 3, to me at least, and maybe this is just because of the movement creep in Overwatch 2, but to me, movement feels really, like, slow and clunky. It could also be the fact that it's third person, too. I mean, I imagine that if I was to actually watch, like, a match of Overwatch in third person, it might feel slow and clunky, too. So it might just be the camera perspective that's throwing me off with that, but to me, movement in the game does feel a bit slow and clunky, and I'm not a big fan of it. Another thing I've talked about, like, with my friends who have also tried it, is damage sounds. Like, they feel a bit off. Like, they have, like, obviously, like, hit marker sounds when you actually, like, make contact with an enemy, but for some, I don't know what exactly it is, but it doesn't feel weighty. it feels kind of video gamey, I guess, in a sense, where it feels like, oh, I'm chipping away parts of a health bar, not so much I'm dealing actual physical damage to this enemy. That's kind of what it feels like. It feels like you're just taking bits and chunks off a health bar rather than actually, you know, injuring an enemy till they're dead. It's hard to describe, but like that's kind of what I felt about it. Speaking of the health bars, I don't like the style that they have for the health bars. It feels very like MOBA-like. It feels like League of Legends. It feels like, you know, Smite and all that. Like I don't particularly like the way health bars look in this game. I much prefer the like the segmented health bars in Overwatch. And that's just a little bit of a nitpick. Maybe if the damage sounds, you know, were fixed a bit and having it not sound so much like you're just taking chunks off a health bar, then maybe the style of the health bars wouldn't bother me as much as they do, but that's to be seen. The next con, and this is something that even I've seen people who are enjoying the game and getting into the game have been complaining about, is right now there's no role queue. So teams are wildly unbalanced. Like, a majority of the games that I've gotten into with Marvel Rivals, it seems that the generic team comp that people go for is 1 tank, maybe 1 support, and 4 DPS. And that's sometimes you don't even get a tank, and you don't even get a support. Sometimes it's just everyone go DPS. And there's nothing to mitigate that currently in the game. People can just be whatever role they want to be. And yeah, I find that very, very unbalanced. There have been times where, you know, we've just gotten steamrolled because we don't have a healer. No one wants to switch to a healer. So, yeah. Next con that I have is, I mean, one of the biggest reasons why everyone was saying that Marvel Rivals is going to kill Overwatch is because Marvel Rivals was touting the fact that it is 6v6, which obviously, you know, the 6v6 versus 5v5 argument is as old as time in Overwatch 2. And there's a lot of 6v6 purists who just outright and blatantly stick their flag in the ground and say 6v6 was better, so the fact that this game has it is just a massive selling point to them. But to me, I found that 6v6 leads to a lot of visual clutter and makes it really hard to discern the action, especially when there's a lot of heroes that have abilities that require you to not only aim, but also to press a key to activate. For example, Penny Parker with her webs, and then she has to like attach or detach from the webs to actually like use some of her abilities and stuff. The UI on the screen to attach and detach from your webs is so small, and the key button is so small on the screen that in the chaotic barrage of abilities and stuff flooding your eyeballs when trying to play this game, it's hard to discern special little buttons like that and abilities. So a lot of visual clutter. I know that Overwatch back in 6v6 was very similar. We'll see how it is when the 6v6 tests come tomorrow in Season 14. But to me, like, this was a lot of visual clutter, and it was even more visual clutter than I remember, at least from Overwatch 1. So that I didn't like. To me, and this is leading up to kind of like the two biggest points for me, is the story is just not as interesting as Overwatch's. It feels very contrived in a way to make sense of why these heroes are fighting together, rather than telling a, you know, unique kind of story. Because it has something to do with Doctor Doom in an interdimensional battle with Doctor Doom 2099, over some, like, space-time continuum bullshit, and it's just not interesting to me. It feels just, you know, very, very comic booky, very, like, we've seen this kind of shit before in every single comic and every single comic book movie, you know, like, this is, it's not a really believable reason why these heroes would be all fighting together. And to me, like, I guess the biggest point I want to drive home about, like, why I'm personally not going to switch over to Marvel Rivals is, like I was kind of alluding to before, the characters just are not as compelling. Because, like, these are just Marvel characters. Like, we've seen these Marvel characters in movies and other comics, and it's not like we're learning about these characters and finding out who they are like we are with Overwatch characters, you know? I think that the big thing for me is that they expect me to be invested in the characters just because they're from famous comic books and comic book movies. And I'm sorry, but, like, just, that's not what I'm about. I know that Fortnite has also brought over a lot of, like, copyrighted characters into their world, and sometimes they've, like, explained it away through a similar kind of multi-dimensional rift thing in their story. But in Fortnite, they at least built up their universe and their lore with original characters first, before they even thought about bringing copyrighted characters into the game with, like, collabs and stuff. Because I remember back when Fortnite came out, back in, like, 2017, I remember, it was just the core gang. There was no collabs, there was no, you know, Marvel or Disney or Star Wars, there was none of that, right? It was just, it was literally just Jonesy and Peely and, like, the Cuddle Bear thing, I'm forgetting what his name was, but it was just that, right? And they built up their lore through that. And only then, when they finally did that, then they started bringing in the copyrighted characters. But even when they did bring in the copyright characters, they only made them integral to the story very sparingly. There are a few copyrighted characters that have quote-unquote canon lore in Fortnite, that are kind of, like, integral to moving the story forward with Fortnite, but very sparingly do they do that. Only with, like, a select few of, like, beloved fictional copyrighted characters will they, like, make them part of the Fortnite lore. Most of the time, it's just, you know, a fun skin. Speaking of which, that's another thing I didn't put here. It felt very exploitative that the very first thing in the shop for Marvel Rivals is just their MCU skins. It kind of feels to me like, hey, you remember these characters from the movies, right? You wanna go make them, you wanna buy them and make them look like they're in the movies? Like, it felt a bit scummy to me. Overall, like, the game just feels very, very mobile gamey, and it makes sense because it's made by a mobile game developer. I think this is one of NetEase's, like, you know, at least in America, maybe not in China, but at least in America, this is one of, like, NetEase's first major, like, console/PC games. And it does feel like very much like a mobile game in a way. But all that being said, yeah, I don't think I'm going to switch over to Marvel Rivals anytime soon. If you're into Marvel Rivals, if you think it's a great game, fine. I think for me, Marvel Rivals is only ever going to be a very casual game that I will play occasionally, like maybe when I'm burnt out from Overwatch, right? If I'm having a bad day in Overwatch, I'll play a couple rounds of Marvel Rivals. Maybe. But is it going to consume my life like Overwatch has, and is it going to pull me away from Overwatch indefinitely? No. Because I care too deeply about this world and these characters that Blizzard has made, and I don't think it's going to be changing anytime soon. But that is all I got for this video here. Let me know what you guys are feeling about Marvel Rivals in the comments below. Remember, guys, if you liked the video, leave a like. If you didn't, leave a dislike. Subscribe if you haven't already. And as always, I'm Passion, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace. Yeah.